Before the sky glowed red, we were a peaceful race. Our time was spent foraging for food and hunting the local wildlife. Extensive forests dotted the land, and grasslands spread as far as the eye could see. As the seasons changed, we followed the large and docile herbivores as they traveled across the land. When summer came and the temperature rose, we stocked up on water and shielded ourselves from the sun by living in the forests. Stories were told and families were made. With the coming of winter, cold and wet air blew through the forests and mountains, settling on the peaks and grasslands and turning the land white. For our protection, we retreated to caves carved into the mountains by previous generations. In preparation for the renewal of the seasons and the great meet, we made items for trade and prepared for the long journey. Before the clouds burned, we rarely saw conflict or even a war. Our world is a land of plenty. Grasslands as far as the eye can see, forests rich with life, and seas filled with food. Due to its idyllic nature, fighting rarely occurred amongst the tribes. On those rare occasions when tribes did clash, the cause was usually due to the arrival of summer, when resources started to dwindle and during mating season. Over time, separate tribes sought to limit conflict by strengthening bonds of blood and friendship by exchanging offspring. Tribal leaders often used the great meet to show off their firstborns. The tribal elders would meet to discuss important matters while our priests led ceremonies venerating our gods. Before the sky rained hellfire, we only knew death and destruction when the seasons were harsh. Our summers are long, and our winters are harsh. We follow the local herds as they move from one water source to another. A few tribes built fishing communities, hunting the sea life and building great ships to ply the seas. Others learned to trade goods and traveled the land, trading with the different tribes. As the days grew long, we retreated to the thick canopy of the nearby forests. Our warriors competed to bring down the largest herbivore. While they are docile, the males are very protective of their herd. The elders tell many tales of when a large, angry male slew a tribal warrior. Thanks in part to the long summers and harsh winters, our people have grown to become strong and hardy. In preparation for the coming winter, we stored food in caves and cared for the young and the old, the sick and infirm. When a member of the tribe died, we prayed to the gods and ritually burned the body. As winter became spring, each tribe prepared for the long journey to the great meet, the spiritual center of our world. Before the demons came to our world, we worshipped a large pantheon of gods. Imera, god of the stars; Fubor, goddess of hunting; Dedea, goddess of beauty; Tothos, god of beer, wine, and celebration; Irina, goddess of the hearth and home; Hiniar, god of night and day; Briotal, goddess of forests and fertility; Zovor, god of justice; Etia, goddess of the land, sea, and sky; Ides, god of death and the underworld; Kitar, god of peace and prosperity; Oris, goddess of war; Taxtia, goddess of trade. When the sky glowed red, we prayed to Etia and Imera. As the clouds above us burned, our priests sought wisdom from Hiniar, and when the sky rained hellfire, destroying our homes and burning the forests, we thought about offering sacrifices to Ides. The demons appeared during the latest great meet. While our elders discussed essential matters, the tribes mingled, celebrated, and renewed bonds of old. During the fourth day of the great meet, at the height of celebrations, the sky turned red and darkened. We looked up and watched in horror as the clouds burned and giant black monsters emerged from within. The clouds continued to burn as they flew through the air, the sky monsters flying down to the ground, disgorging demons. Our elders sent scouting parties to investigate the demons' landing sites as hellfire rained down from the sky. Upon reaching the landing sites, the scouts discovered strange metallic buildings belching great plumes of acrid smoke. They were also shocked to discover nearby forests were chopped down for fuel and burnt to ash. One of the scouting parties reached the lip of a hill overlooking a nearby landing site. As the scouts looked down into the valley, they were horrified by the appearance of the demons. The demons were almost as tall as they were wide, and when our scouts observed them standing upright, they appeared to be twice the height of our tallest warriors. The demons walked on all fours, using their bulky forearms to propel themselves along the ground, reaching surprisingly fast speeds. Stubby tails protruded from the armor that the demons appeared to be wearing. Fire and green lightning erupted from the weapons the demons held as they attacked everything they encountered. Several foolish scouting parties chose to engage the demons in a futile attempt to push them back. Within moments of their attack, the demons either fired at the scouts or used long-bladed weapons to slice them in half. Fearing the worst, several smaller tribes fled toward the nearby forest and mountain range. Other tribes tried to stop them, arguing that they should stay to fight the demons. A fight broke out, and our oldest priest intervened before too many were injured. She ordered the fighting to cease and allowed those tribes wishing to flee to leave. To those who wanted to remain, the priest called for all warriors to prepare defenses. Everyone else was encouraged to pray. As our warriors dug trenches and built barricades, the great meat echoed to the sound of 1,000 prayers. As the days passed and the sound of approaching demons got louder, our warriors prepared to die. All the while we prayed to our gods for deliverance. On the 7th day our prayers were answered. Our priests led what we thought would be our final prayer. A loud bang was heard from above after everyone had recited the second verse. Looking at the sky, we saw a line of black smoke followed by a muddy brown ring and what appeared to be a white cloud. Emerging from within was some kind of off-white pod. Similar in shape to a seed pod from one of our trees, however, it was much larger and not something we could make. The pod hit the ground near the great meat with an explosion of mud and stone. Several of our warriors rushed to where it impacted and watched as the pod rose from the ground and unfurled like a flower. Appearing from within was an assortment of odd-looking pieces of metal. A bright red light blinded the warrior standing nearby, and shortly afterwards it changed to a green light, and the strange metal pod creature emitted an odd sound. Moments later, multiple loud bangs were heard, and several more seed pods impacted the ground. Each one hit the ground around the perimeter of the great meat. After each pod unfurled, a bright red light was seen, followed by a green light and the same sound. The first sign we had that these odd metallic pods were friendly was when a demon charged our barricades. As its bounding strides brought it closer, several pods near the barricades made strange noises and rotated. The demon glowed red as multiple lights shined upon it. Fire and lightning erupted from the metallic pods before the demon could attack the nearest warrior. In the blink of an eye, the demon exploded. Our warriors stood dumbfounded as the demon's body collapsed to the ground, purple blood pooling across the ground. A great roar echoed across the great meat as more and more demons bounded towards us. Within moments, they were all dead. Each demon exploded as the pods fired at them. One of our priests declared that Emera had heard our call and sent stars to aid us. Another priest argued that Brautel sent the seed pods. Before more priests could say which gods had answered our prayers, the great meat was covered by a large shadow. Looking up, we saw what appeared to be a giant sea creature flying through the air. It descended from the sky and hovered above the great meat. Our attention was pulled away from the off-white creature when an alert was sounded. Scouts watching the nearest demons spotted their black monsters breathe fire and ascend into the sky. More of the monsters rose into the sky. Some headed for the sea creature while others tried to flee. Before they could get too far, more descended from the sky, each one belching forth blue fire and lightning, striking a black monster. The ground vibrated and roared as they crashed into the ground. Smaller flying sea creatures detached from a couple of the larger ones and flew down to the ground. Before we could witness what happened next, one of the smaller creatures landed at the entrance to the great meat. Watching it land, we realized that it was in fact some kind of flying craft. Two of our warriors approached it, but the heat, hot air, and dirt kicked up by the vessel stopped them from getting too close as it landed. The front of the craft split in half and a ramp lowered. As a lone figure walked down the ramp, our warriors watched in stunned silence. Standing a head taller than our tallest warrior, the stranger had 2 arms and legs but no tail. Dressed all in black except for the arms and the top of its torso, which were white. A peaked cap adorned the stranger's head with short brown hair. A pair of striking blue eyes reflected the daylight as they stepped forward and smiled. "Hello," the stranger said. "Take me to your leader," they demanded, gesturing to the nearest warrior. Surprised that the stranger could speak our language, the warrior it spoke to was unsure what to do. It looked to its brothers for help, and as they talked amongst themselves, One of the elders called for the stranger to be brought forward. As our warriors escorted them through the great meet, people started to call out to them. "Who sent you?" asked a young female. "Did you hear our prayers?" called out an older male. "Which god do you serve?" queried a young priest. "Have you come to save us?" a tribal leader asked. "Will you fight the demons?" pleaded one of our warriors. The stranger smiled at us as one of our warriors led them to where the elders and our priests stood. The assembled tribes grew restless and started to demand answers to their questions. One of our elders called out and assured us that answers would soon be forthcoming. Ascending the large dais at the center of the great meet, the stranger was greeted in turn by each tribal elder and our most senior priests. Our oldest priest suggested that everyone retire to the rear of the great meet, where the stranger could speak freely. We watched as they headed to the rear with the stranger. More of the large off-white craft appeared in the sky above the great meet as we waited. We watched as several smaller craft, similar to the one which landed nearby, detached and headed toward the demons' landing sites. We heard loud bangs and noises similar to the blue lightning and fire we saw earlier could be heard in the distance. Hours went by, and eventually the meeting with the stranger finished. Arriving at the dais, they bowed to our leaders and headed for the craft they came in. Everyone watched as the stranger walked up the ramp and covered their eyes as the strange craft flew into the air. Addressing the assembled tribes, our elders informed us that the stranger came from another world, and their king decreed that ours would be offered the chance to join them. They would rid our world of the demons and, in return, be allowed to build a settlement and mine its riches. We would be elevated and join their empire as vassals. Over the next few days, the sounds of battle grew quieter, scouting parties returned, and even a few of the tribes that had fled returned to the great meet. Our priests declared that a new god had ascended to the top of our pantheon. Before long, the stranger returned to the great meet alongside several warriors belonging to our newest god. They announced to the assembled tribes that the demons were all dead. Our response was simple: all hail the Terran Empire.